Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Earth Save's monthly potluck here in Coral Gables Congregational Church. This event is sponsored by the core group of Earth Save Miami, and it has been for 18 years. I think this is the oldest continuous vegan event in South Florida. And I'm glad to see you all here. I know we have some of our regulars, some old friends, and some new friends here tonight. We're in for a special treat. This lady, Susan Hargreaves, decided to write another book, which I'm holding here. Animal Hero Kids, Voices for the Voiceless. Can you get a shot of that?
Got it.
Furthermore, it's my pleasure to introduce Susan Hargreaves. Quite a while ago, when she was just a young girl, Susan was the chair of Earth Save Miami. I remember it well. Today, I bring you her newest incarnation of the work that Susan does, which spans the United States. Her talk will be self-explanatory, but I'm going to tell you who Susan is. She's the creator and host of Animal Voices, of a Toronto radio series. That was when, Susan?
1990.
1990, so she's been doing the work for a long time. She was awarded the Distinguished Educator, Eco-Hero, Humane and Environmental Educator Award. Susan is the author, let me put this down. Susan is the author of The Hair-Raising Adventures of Rabida III, and also Animal Hero Tips. She's also the creator of We'd Rather Go Naked Than Wear Fur, an anti-fur protest that very graphically made the point. We don't want to be taking fur for our clothing from other creatures. Susan also founded Earthkind. She fosters compassion and ethical choices in children and adults via environmentally friendly vegan foods and hands-on activities. AnimalHeroKids.org is where you want to go for some of the best and humane education in the United States today. Susan started out as an undercover investigator at the Keele Street Stockyards, and she coordinated ARC2, the Canadian Animal Rights Network. Now she uses humane education to teach kindness and compassion for all beings. Therefore, Susan Hargreaves.
Thank you, Jeffrey Tucker. And I love coming to Earth Save potlucks because in this day and age, more than ever, people really need practical tips on how to eat vegan. Let's say you have you just heard about it and you're all alone. I did State of the Animal Nation here years ago, and there was a woman that came, and after she saw State of the Animal Nation, she realized how badly animals are treated on factory farms, and she became vegan, and she went home and she told her husband, and her husband said, "I'm leaving until you come to your senses." She's all alone in the world with her decision to go vegan. And thanks to Earth Save Miami, she kept coming back She could see what other people were eating, and she had some support. And now she is an incredible activist, humane educator, and her husband has just turned vegan. Her children are vegan, her mother was vegan, and her name is Linda Bauer, who you've probably heard of here. So for her to have that support was really absolutely vital to her change. And she has done so much good becoming vegan. So as Jeff said, basically, I know that in some instances I may be preaching to the choir here because some people are already vegan and perhaps some people are vegetarian, but I'm hoping tonight to just tell you a little bit about what Animal Hero Kids does and how I came to be standing here. And when I was 9 years old, I was taken to a chicken hatchery because I love animals so much. My Aunt Alwyn said, "You love animals so much, come to work with me today." She was a receptionist at a chicken hatchery in West Yorkshire. So she brings me there. I was visiting from Canada, and she said, she goes to her front desk and she says, "Go to the back, that's where the chickens are, all the baby chickens." So I said, "Great." She said, "Just go down that hallway." So I go down that hallway, open a metal door, go into a room that is about 3 times the size of this room, with conveyor belts and big industrial-sized bins, and male chicks being gassed and suffocated, and the little baby chicks that were still alive crawling out from under the dead ones. As soon as those chicks were hatched, they got out of their shell, they were sorted, and they were thrown in these big industrial-sized bins. And I saw the pipes coming out from the bins. And I was like about the height of the bins. So I was like eye level. And I turned and looked at the adults in the room. The adults must do something, right? Because generally, when you're 9 years old, you think that adults are not going to be cruel on purpose to animals because it's wrong. Everybody knows it's wrong. So I turned to the adults for help, and naturally. And then I realized that it was business as usual. They had their hats on, they were sorting, they were talking, and the sorting was between the male and the female. And it was just business as usual. What a shock to realize that just in that one bin, all those little individual, gorgeous little baby chicks just coming into the world were dying in front of me. And my aunt would go in there every day, and that was her work life. And then I multiplied it by all of the places that I'd never seen that do that to baby chicks. And I started to realize that animal cruelty on a global scale in the factory farming industry is rampant. And that 98% of the animals who are killed and suffer each year are factory farmed animals. And those animals have just as much personality and individual likes and dislikes and quirks as Lovey, my little Lovey, that comes with me into schools. They're all individuals, each and every one of them. And they're treated like the chairs in this room. And imagine years later when I went to, in Canada, the CNE, the Canadian National Exhibition, with my school. And I was in 8th grade, and it was a school trip. And in the Canadian National Exhibition, there was all sorts of things, vegetables and horses, and I could smell, the hay. And I was living in an Ontario housing project, which is like what you would call over here in America the ghetto. and I was living, 16 floors. It was very congested city of Toronto. There really wasn't much greenery around. And I really would thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to see some beautiful animals here today. And so I come to one area, and there is an Iron Maiden. Does anyone know what an Iron Maiden is? Has anybody ever heard of a gestation crate? No. So basically, we're talking about this big, like this, and the mother pig is in there, and then all the baby pigs are there, and she can't move. She just lies on her side, and all the baby pigs are there. Well, they had one of these set up in the Canadian National Exhibition in the inside building, and there were all the baby pigs with the mother, and they couldn't move. This was not how I pictured finally getting out of the Ontario Housing Projects for the day and seeing real live animals, who I always loved animals because they're so magical to me. And what I did, not being a shrinking violet when something was wrong, I went up and said to the man that was there, "What are you doing to this pig? What are you doing to these pigs?" And he said, "Well, that's what we do. That's how we do it. This is the, go away, stand over there." And then again, I realized, and I think everybody does, that ends up going vegan and changing their lives and perhaps getting teased by their friends or made fun of by their family, and all of the things that people go through. But I think that sometimes it is more than one instance of cruelty that you see that finally makes you go, "Oh, I can't participate in this anymore. I didn't realize that I was funding this type of cruelty." And the next thing that came for me was opening up the Toronto Sun and seeing photos of pigs that were lying in their own vomit. They had burn marks on them, and it was from the Keele and St. Clair stockyards, which wasn't that far from me. So I decided to investigate, and that was my first investigation to Keele and St. Clair stockyards. At that time, it was before people were really doing the undercover investigations like they are today, because they didn't have anything to fear, because nobody really knew what they were doing. They didn't even have big fences. They didn't have security. Nobody cared about we're talking, in the early 80s, or nobody cared really. Nobody knew. They didn't have anything to be afraid of, even though it was right down in downtown Toronto. So I go there with a friend of mine, and I see all of the animals being unloaded and electroshock rods, and I get friendly with the fellow who works at the Keele and St. Clair stockyards. He's there all by himself all weekend, one guy, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of animals, all kinds of animals, goats, pigs, all kinds of animals. And there's no water. The animals that have been unloaded, that were traveling for 4 or 5 days, they get to the stockyards, and there are these stone troughs without any water in them. And the guy was laughing because the water was turned off and they didn't have any water. They're all standing in the water and no water. And they were standing in the trough looking for water. And if I needed anything else, that made me what some people would think of as a rabid animal activist, because I was almost like the ancient mariner, wanting to tell everybody what was really happening to the animals, because I thought still that all people have to do is learn what they're contributing to, and they're going to stop, because people don't know, and I still generally think that 34 years later, being 56 in July, I still think that people don't want to harm animals. They go to the shop, they pick up this package, and they are not seeing the history of the little piece of flesh that they are consuming. They are not thinking of it. And that's what makes me still hopeful after all these years. The changes that I've seen since that time. Yes, there are still factory farms, but when I was vegan, and I still am, but I was vegan having lunch with somebody 17 years ago. And this person who was a teacher in Miami said to me, "Tell me about this club that you're a member of, the club that studies the planet Vega." And I said, "No, I'm a vegan." And she said, "Well, that means you study the planet Vega." And I said, "No," and I had to explain, what vegan is. That was only 16 years ago. It took me a while to catch up with the fact that people now know what vegan is. And I was talking to someone today that was leafleting in Lincoln Road 6 years ago. People didn't really know what vegan is, as opposed to today, they're meeting vegans from all over the world. So things are changing. So another thing that happens in Canada, Toronto, is the fur industry. So I was very determined. They still have leg hole traps that are legal today. So a lot of different instances made me realize how cruel the fur industry is. And I decided to, every 2 weeks, have something about fur in the newspaper. And so that was in 1990 when I came up with the idea of why not have really nude people run through Alan Cherry Fur Store. Alan Cherry had a commercial where he would drag a lynx around all the furs and do a commercial in Yorkville. And so I organized it where 3 people would handcuff themselves to the railing inside the store. 2 people would go with a roll that, in the roll that was Christmas wrapped, was actually a banner, and they stripped in the changing rooms, a male and a female, because I thought it should be even and not sexist. Then I had a volunteer who was going to come and pick up the nude people after they ran through. So then, it was incredible that it worked, and the media went wild over it, absolutely crazy, and it went international, and the next week we were doing a fur protest, and we had about 60 media come, Associated Press, all of that. We were blocking the entranceway to a fur store that was having a big sale. And they said, "Are you gonna go nude again?" I wasn't. So that's why that worked. And then Dan Matthews from PETA called and said, were you guys really nude? And then PETA did it. Now, of course, everybody does it, and it's wonderful, because I think whatever works. If it gets media and it gets people discussing what's happening to animals and they learn, then I think whatever works. And Ingrid Newkirk has helped a lot. I've done anti-fur commercials during Oprah Winfrey, and it's thanks to Ingrid Newkirk from People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals that was so free with her video footage that they didn't even want credit for. So that's really wonderful. So let's fast forward to Animal Hero Kids. The reason that I became a humane educator is because I started to realize that the kids and the teens were naturally compassionate. You have to unlearn being compassionate. So I wanted to make sure that that was fostered, that the compassion that they felt naturally was fostered. So after being arrested too outside of SeaWorld for protesting, I decided that to completely focus on humane education was the solution. It's a preventative measure to prevent animal cruelty. So I started Animal Hero Kids. And now there are, basically I reach about 30,000 students each year with kindness education programs. And we have Animal Hero Kids co-presidents. And this is a video that they did in Los Angeles for us last year that will sort of bring you up to speed about Animal Hero Kids and our awards. We recognize Animal Hero Kids from all over the world for speaking up. It was 2013, it was the first year that all of the Animal Hero Kids were vegetarian. That's when I realized that we are really at a point where there is great change. And us people in the room are part of that change. Because you speak up when you need to, and you're an example of peaceful, kind eating. So we're going to see that video, and we'll see if it works. If it has the sound. And believe it or not, sometimes I even use the slider.
That animals should be treated
Sorry.
not like humans should be treated.
It's actually,
Animals shouldn't be abused either, because they're just like us.
oh, where did it go? Sorry. No. This is right. Nope. Oh, well, let me see. Is it Russell Simmons and Paul McCartney?